shares of one company wherein it had invested 40 crore rupees as investment up to the last year. During the instant year, the associate changed its policy and that investments was converted into stock in trade. The case for which I have got the brief for filing of bill, and for investments of 40 crore rupees, the associate owned funds of 10 crore rupees, it had borrowed loans of 30 crore rupees, and it paid interest of 3 crore rupees. Okay, and it claimed it as a business expenditure. Is it allowable?
If it was the day after it was declared as stock in trade, it is allowable. If it is before the date it was declared as it was an investment, then it is not allowable.
Now here,
so, because the income tax is also prescribed,
now
you convert it into stock. You are
see what happens here is the intention of the SSC prima facie in the case which I just now got the brief is very much evident that it wants to get the business expenditure, it wants to bring it as a business expenditure. What I am trying to mean is that why I am referring to so many judgments, because you are finding some judgments wherein stock in trade additions have been upheld. Maybe that case may be similar to the case which I am just now citing. Maybe the case what you are citing is that you have received 10 crore rupees as income from trading in shares and only 1 lakh rupees as dividend. That case cannot be equated with the case which I am just now referring to. So what is important here is that we have to actually correctly apply the correct judgment and say that the satisfaction note is very important here. Whatever disallowance you are offering, that I fully agree with you, at the core of my heart, I fully agree with you that for trader in shares, disallowance should not be called for. But I again differ with the view with that, because as soon as you say that trader in shares disallowance is not called for, then you find such kind of tax plannings which have been done. Just now I gave an example. Now, we have lot of judgments, American Express Bank, Munjam case, India Advantage case, Vivek Malhotra case. Now, one very important judgment in your context, I am saying, the Mani case. It has given a unique formula. It says that when you are trader in shares, how can you attribute the entire interest paid or the entire administrative expenses for the purpose of disallowance under Rule 80? Because my major part of earning is trading in shares, which is taxable. I may be receiving some exempt income of 5 lakhs or 10 lakhs. Okay, how can you treat the entire trading in shares for the purpose of disallowance? And it gave a very unique formula. It says that when you are trader in shares, I am reading the third paragraph of this part, Rule 8D22, that is interest paid, needs to be scaled down by forgetting the expenditure so arrived at between tax-free and taxable income. Given that the dominant objective of shareholding is to earn taxable income, an ad hoc ratio of 20% of the total tax exempt dividend will be reasonable. So it is saying that out of the interest paid, which is common, you have to make a disallowance only of 20% of that. So first, what it is saying, you calculate the disallowance under Rule 8D22, and whatever disallowance comes, you disallow only 20% of that. In that case, dividend income was very high. In your case, there may be a situation that you have not earned any exempt income, or there may be exempt income which is only 1% of the total taxable income which is generated on sale of shares. If we apply the principle laid on the Mani Estates case, we are getting a clue how to deal with this situation. Because I told you in the very first hand that whatever disallowance has to be offered in section 14A, that is for your satisfaction. First of all, you have to find out what basis you have calculated the disallowance. AO has to record his finding, how he finds your calculation to be incorrect. Only then he can apply Rule 80. And if you do your calculation and AO without recording his satisfaction makes a disallowance, on the first ground only, that because AO has not recorded satisfaction for disallowing the disallowance offered by you, the tribunal will give you relief. There are judgments which I have just now, that Champion case I have referred to, that judgment I also referred to that point. I think I am clear with you. Now next question which sometimes comes up. If the SSC has received interest and paid interest, and the interest received is more, can you disallow, will any disallowance under Rule 8D22 will come or not? Are you getting my question? Whether net interest will be, if the net interest income is positive, the SSC has paid interest, received interest, net interest income is positive, well, whether there will be any disallowance. And second case, net interest paid is more, then whether you will consider the gross interest paid or net interest paid. Here I find some judgments, Morgan Stanley case, it says that disallowance has to be done on a net basis. Again, I find Karnavati Petrochem case, ITT Ahmedabad also, it says that it has to be a net basis. Now,
So in case if the income is more than the interest expense, there will be no disallowances.
there are two judgments on the issue, which you can make a noting of that. Those two judgments say like this. But again, nexus becomes very important. You have to actually, when you are pleading a case when in the context of 14A, you have to actually make it a point. But prima facie, there are judgments which are giving you strength. But if I find that yes, there is a net income, but see what happens. Let us take an example. You have borrowed loans in the past. There was no borrowing in the past. During the year, 50 lakhs rupees of mutual funds have been purchased and 50 lakhs rupees of loan has been taken. Loan has been taken for making investments in mutual funds. And tomorrow you say, sir, even though I paid interest on mutual funds, but my net interest income is positive, then,
Doesn't make sense.
so what I am trying to mean, you have to actually plead the case in a very proper manner.
What
You have judgments to support you. If there is indivisible funds, it cannot be bifurcated. Everything goes in and goes out. Then yes, you can be saved. But if you allow the assessing officer to find out the facts which goes against you, then you may not be saved.
What if opening investment is zero, closing investment is zero? During that
If the computation machinery fails, there cannot be any disallowance.
so say opening balance investment is zero, closing is zero. During the year some investment made and
Rule
during
8D22 disallowance cannot be there.
and
There can be direct disallowance. 8D21 can be there, but 8D22 cannot be there.
2, 3.
2, 3 cannot be there. 8D23 cannot be there. 8D22 cannot be there. 8D21 can be there.
Sir, this net interest concept, section 14A relates to disallowance. The disallowance relates to expenses only. So I think that gross income and expenses, that should be bifurcated, and that expense part should be treated with the 14A.
Now what happens here is,
One thing, more content. In this regard, I think I am of the view that decision of Supreme Court in the case of Dr. V.P. Gopinathan will come into effect. Receiving of interest and paying of interest are two different transactions. So it has to be offered separately. Most of the controversy that we are discussing about 14A none of it has reached the apex court. There are decisions in favor of the revenue, there are decisions in favor of the taxpayers. Some tribunals have taken a view opposite to what has been taken by other tribunals. So till the issue is finally decided by the Supreme Court, as a revenue officer, assessing officers may probably be taking a stand in favor of revenue only. But on this issue, I would like to differ with you that V.P. Gopinathan's case is.
sir, I give an example.
clear.
I give an example. Which is the largest infrastructure company in Calcutta? Finance infrastructure company, infrastructure finance company. Shrey. What Shrey does? It borrows money from banks and it gives money to the various from where it is getting. So now if its own fund is 100 crore rupees and it is borrowing 1000 crore rupees, its investment is 100 crore rupees and it is getting net interest out of that. The purpose of borrowing of 1000 crore rupees is not to make investments. The purpose of borrowing, most of the banks which are giving loan, they are hypothecating the leased assets.
That is okay. So in that case, if a taxpayer is able to prove the direct nexus of funds for taking this thing, then it will be a direct expenditure for earning income which is taxable. That anyway will not come, that is beyond
So
Basically, for finance companies, it may be allowed.
yes, that is what I am trying to mean. For finance company, it will be allowed.
Because the total profit is taxable.
Now, one issue which is very important, which is sometimes we chartered accountants are making a mistake also here is whether book property is required to be adjusted with respect to disallowance under Rule 8D. Now, what happens when you calculate a book profit under Section 115JB? How you calculate? You start with net profit as per PL account. You make certain adjustments which are there in 115 JB, and then you reach to the book profit. And one of the adjustment which is there is amount of income exempt under section 10, excepting section 1038, accepting clause 38 of section 10 subsection 38, that is to be deducted while calculating the book profit. The question here comes up here is, when you make a disallowance under rule 8D, so are you required to add that disallowance when you calculate the book profit or not? Yes? The answer is very clear. RBK stockbroking case, if the your assessee is voluntarily offering some disallowance, that has to be added while calculating the book profit. But if there is a disallowance by the AO, now when we talk about section 14A, we have three clauses. First clause says amount of expenditure incurred. Second clause B and C says, if in the opinion of the AO, the disallowance offered by the assessee is not correct, or the assessee claims no expenditure has been incurred, but the AO of the opinion that some expenditure has been incurred. So clause B and C clause talks about the AO part, but first clause talks about the disallowance by the assessee part. So if there is any disallowance done by the assessee, that has to be added back. And if there is any disallowance done by the assessing officer, then he cannot change the book profit because of Supreme Court judgment in Apollo Tyres case. In Supreme Court in Apollo Tyres case is very clearly laid down that AO is not required to change the profit which have been laid down at the AGM, excepting and to the extent as mentioned in section 115 JB. My interpretation of law based upon the three judgments which I quoted, RBK and Boyd India and Gujarat State Energies case, is that whatever disallowance is offered by the assessee or whatever to either an auditor, in the tax audit report, if you are making any comment that this is the disallowance under section 14A, because you are required to mention in the tax audit report what is the disallowance, what is the amount of expenditure incurred for the purpose of earning exempt income. So if you are mentioning any figure there and you are giving a MAT certificate, my dear friends, my suggestion strongly would be then you have to make a disallowance while calculating. In the 29B, you have to add back that figure. That is my interpretation. When we talk about alternate minimum tax, AMT, it is not at all common in Calcutta. I will not discuss much about it because AMT is applicable only when you have a deduction under section 10AA or chapter 6A part C. So in Calcutta we hardly find any units which are getting exemption under section 1080IA, 80IB, 80IC or 10AA, etc. So I am not discussing AMT, but let me be clear that when you are calculating any disallowance in tax audit report, then when you are doing AMT calculation again, you are required to add back. Tax audit I have discussed. Now you have not offered any disallowance and the assessing officer makes some disallowance, whether there can be any penalty on that. Yes. Now for this purpose there is a landmark Supreme Court judgment in Reliance Petro case, which was on section 14A only, and which has held that when there is a disallowance made by the AO in section 14A, penalty will not attract. But my dear friends, there is a catch here. Now if you make a disallowance, if there is something mentioned in the tax audit report that this is the amount of expenditure incurred for purpose of earning exempt income, and the assessee while filing the return does not make a disallowance of the amount which is treated as a disallowed expenditure in tax audit report, then there can be a penalty with respect to that. Then that is something which is not interpretation law, that is something which is filing of incorrect particulars. But if nothing is mentioned in the tax audit report and assessing officer, assessing does not make any disallowance and tomorrow the assessing officer makes some disallowance, then in my opinion penalty will not lie. Summing up, section 14A, the decision of Daga Capital Special Bench is no longer a good law consequent to Godrej case, Mumbai High Court. Rule 8D cannot be applied unless there is a proximate cause for disallowance as held in Wolpart Space and Godrej case. Thus, AO has to record satisfaction of proximate connection between expenditure and exempt income in terms of subsection 2 and 3. Expenditure under section 14A would include direct and indirect Walford case. Disallowance possible even if there is no exempt income, CAM Invest case. However, Avdesh Mercantile case may be relied upon that income on investment will be taxable. Disallowance cannot exceed expenses, Hero Cycles case. 14A may be applicable on stock in trade, Maxop and Dhanuka case. However, facts will determine whether inventory in shares are giving dividend or not. Own funds argument is still effective. Friends, I think I have been able to clarify whatever issues are there, and section 14A, as I was pointing out, that there is hardly any Supreme Court decision with respect to 14 capital A, excepting I find Reliance Petro case, which was before the insertion of section 14A itself. So there are various High Court judgments, few High Court judgments, most of them are tribunal decisions only. So the law is evolving in respect of section 14A. I have just tried to let down the various judgments to give you an idea how to plan out your affairs, and that can be a thing. And if in the context of section 14A you have any question, I would like to give a reply, and then I would like to come down to my second topic. Yes. Thank you, sir.
एक प्रॉब्लम मेरा आपके सामने है. Mr. Chapadia has a private limited company. He is a director and a 50% shareholder in that company. That company has reserves and surplus to the extent of 100 crores. This company has given money to this company. This company has given money to this company. This company has given money to this company, and finally this company has given money to Mr. Chapadia. Will provisions of section 222E be applicable in that case?
Yes, sir. The corporate will be lifted. The Companies Act will lift the corporate, you lift the corporate will and put it as
It will be attracted?
Yes.
This is exactly the case of Jignesh Shah of NACL fame. He has exactly done the same thing. Bombay High Court says no. It's basically for a technical disallowance. A technical disallowance is to be seen in that angle only. Whether that company has given loan or this company has given loan. This is a very recent decision.
The Companies Act, when such cases happen, the intention is to defraud the system. The corporate
I don't know that, but Bombay, I had made that decision, but Bombay High Court says no.
corporate will be
हाँ? बॉम्बे हाई कोर्ट का डिसीजन है, बॉम्बे ट्राइब्यूनल का डिसीजन को हाई कोर्ट हैज कंफर्म द डिसीजन. So this is one of the decisions. Now other decision regarding beneficiary versus beneficiary shareholders versus. Now some 7 or 8 days I was just going through that decision only. I am unable to find out. Now earlier we used to say that if the beneficial shareholder is someone and the registered shareholder is someone, that is in the case of HUF and this thing, then people were getting away with it. Again Bombay High Court has said that no, registered shareholder is important and it will be taxed in his hand. And it's just 7 to 10 days ago that decision has come. So these two are the very important decisions in 222E cases. Without taking much of your time, I would request Chapadia Sahab to proceed with the basic provisions and the related controversies related to deemed dividend.
Sir, I told you also in the beginning, I will not allow you to complete my session unless you compliment my session after I have completed. So whatever, it is very nice to be with sir that whatever I leave, he completes my part so that the session becomes very lively and becomes very exhaustive. And sir makes it a point that whatever I was missing, so he goes on writing, Chapadia has missed this, Chapadia has missed it, and he makes it fun to refer. I mean, he has a lot of resources with him behind. Now, what is the deemed dividend? We are talking about deemed dividend. Has it anywhere defined in the Act? It is nowhere defined in the Act. So, now when we talk about dividend, dividend has been defined in the Income Tax Act which has a different meaning vis-a-vis the dividend as defined in the Companies Act. Now, there are a lot of things wherein there are difference in the Companies Act vis-a-vis the Income Tax Act. For example, body corporate. As per Companies Act, body corporate includes LLP. And as per Companies Act, as per Income Tax Act, there is no definition of body corporate. So, same thing happens with dividend. As per the Income Tax Act, dividend is an inclusive definition and it covers 5 different clauses A, B, C, D, E. Mind it, it's an inclusive definition. Dividend includes. Now, clause A, B, C, D, we generally don't quite often see that. We are generally concerned with clause E. That is what in the practical front we call it as a deemed dividend. But since it's a class with respect to deemed dividend, I would like to quickly just rush down to clause A, B, C and D. What are those? Clause A is what we technically call a dividend. Distribution of accumulated profits resulting in company assets. So when you are giving, distributing something to the shareholders by way of from bank account or something else, then it is a release of company assets, that is bank balance. So clause A is distribution of accumulated profits by release of company assets. Clause B, distribution of debentures or deposit certificates or bonus to preference shareholders to the extent of accumulated profits. Now what happens? The company decides not to give checks for dividend, and in turn the company decides to issue debentures free of cost to the shareholders. So debentures, when you are issuing the debentures, again it is treated as a dividend. It is treated as if you are distributing dividend. Now I will discuss in the later part of my slide which dividend is tax free, which dividend is not tax free. But let us for the time being understand that even creating a liability in the form of issuing debentures or issuing deposit certificates or bonus to preference shareholders. But what if you are issuing bonus to equity shareholders? That is not coming within the purview of dividend. Distribution on liquidation, attributable to accumulated profit just before liquidation. It's a very technical, I am not discussing much about it. Distribution on reduction of share capital to the extent of accumulated profits. Now, share capital reduction, Companies Act, we can have 2 different situations. One, a company which paid up capital is 10 rupees and company decides to reduce its paid up value from 10 rupees to 1 rupee and give 9 rupees to the shareholders. That is one part of capital reduction. Second, the company reduces its paid up value from 10 rupees to 1 rupees and 9 rupees is credited to capital reserve. Here we are concerned only with the first part. When the company decides to reduce its paid up capital from 10 rupees to 1 rupee and 9 rupees is distributed to the shareholders, only then it will be treated as a dividend. And fifth is loan or advance to shareholder, which I will discuss in the later part of, discuss in detail this part of the clause. Now, we as auditors quite often understand, and even some assessors also ask कि dividend हो गया तो क्या हुआ, tax free हो गया, because dividend तो tax free है. My dear friends, first of all, only those dividends are tax free on which dividend distribution tax is paid, and dividend distribution tax is paid on dividend which are covered in clause A to D. So if you are giving dividend by bank, if you are issuing debentures, if you are giving deposit certificates, in all these cases, even if you are giving debentures to the shareholders, you are required to pay dividend distribution tax. On liquidation, on capital reductions, you are required to pay dividend distribution tax. So as soon as you are paying dividend distribution tax, then the concerned instrument becomes tax free in the hands of shareholder. So clause A to D are cases which are chargeable to dividend distribution tax, and it is tax free in the hand of shareholder. Clause E, which is loan or advance to certain categories of shareholders, that is covered, on which there is no dividend distribution tax. It means when I am giving loan, I am not required to pay, but most of us are missing a very important point, that we are required to take to deduct TDS on deemed dividend under clause E of section 222. It means TDS under section 194 is applicable on loan given to the prescribed shareholder. Yes, that is not called for disallowance because you are not claiming that loan as an expense. So 40A IA does not cover 194. Now, so it is taxable in the hands of shareholder, and it is no distribution tax is required to be paid. In this presentation which I am giving to you, I am confining much of my concentration on 222E. That is, but in practical terms we call it as a deemed dividend. Now, this 222E, what happens in this case, in this particular clause is, even if I am receiving loan from a company in which I am a shareholder, that loan is treated as a taxable income of mine. I have taken a loan of 1 crore rupees on 1st day of March from a company in which I am having a 50% stake, and I paid that loan on 5th day of March. Only for 5 days I have taken and I have given interest on that loan. Now this 1 crore rupees is treated as the income of mine, and it is not treated as the expense of the company in which I am having a 50% stake. So this is a draconian provision. Why this section was introduced? This is very important because some writ petitions were filed when this section was introduced, and those were not, those writ petitions were dismissed. So now you can say, as far as constitutional validity of this particular provision is concerned, that has been upheld by the courts, that yes, it is constitutionally valid. So the purpose of this 222E of Income Tax Act is to bring within the tax net accumulated profits which are distributed by closely held companies to its shareholders in the form of loans. The purpose being that persons who manage such closely held companies should not arrange their affairs in a manner that they assist the shareholders in avoiding the payment of taxes by having companies pay or distribute what would legitimately be dividend in the hands of shareholders' money in the form of advance or loan. What I am trying to, their purpose of this was that when a private limited company is having some surplus funds, forget about Companies Act 2013, because now, sir, with the Companies Act 13 it is very difficult to give loan to the shareholders also. Now the idea of this part is that when there is a private closely held company which is having surplus funds, if you distribute that in the form of dividend, what we technically call as a dividend, but we practically, then you are required to pay dividend distribution tax. Now, if instead of giving it as a dividend, what if you distribute it to the shareholders in the form of loan, then it is your own funds you are giving it to the, so the purpose is that as soon as you give it to your shareholders in the form of loan, any shareholder is owing more than 10% stake, it will be treated as a income in the hands of the shareholder, because you are trying to bypassing the act and distributing the surplus funds. So that's why they are using the word accumulated profits everywhere. So if you are not having accumulated profits, fair enough, no issue, no dividend, no deemed income. If you are having a deemed dividend and you are giving it to a minority shareholder, again there is no problem. But as soon as you are giving to someone who is having 10% stake, then it is treated as income. So that was the objective of introducing this section. So now, in order to discuss 222E, I have tried to cover my presentation into 5 parts. First, the type of company which is covered. What I am trying to mean, the type of company which gives loan. It is not applicable to all the entities. It is applicable on certain type of companies which give loans. So what are the type of companies to which section 222E applies? Second, what are the nature of payments? They are using the word loan or advance. How you interpret the word loan or advance? So that is second part of my discussion. Third, persons covered. It is saying that it is covered to loan or advance given to a person who is beneficially entitled to 10% voting power and not entitled to fixed rate of dividend. So now I will try to analyze the nitty-gritty of this part. So what are the persons or to a concern in which such person is having 20% stake, substantial interest? So this part is persons covered. When I am talking for type of company, it is the person who is the company which is giving the loan, and when I am talking about the persons covered in point number 3, it is the recipient of the loan. What is the amount which will be treated as a deemed dividend? They are using the word accumulated profit. How to interpret the term accumulated profit? Whether on the first day of the accounting year, whether it has to be commercial profit, but if depreciation has not been charged in the books. So what is the amount and what is the time of accrual of this deemed dividend? So the first part which I would like to just discuss is what are the companies which gives loan, which are the type of companies which are covered within the provisions of section 222 clause E. So what are the companies which are not covered? It means if these entities, if these companies give any loan, then if you are taking loan from these companies, you are not covered under section 222E. And what are those companies? The companies which public are substantially interested. So if I am getting any loan from a company in which public are substantially interested, and what is a company in which public are substantially interested? Subsection 18 of section 2 has defined some companies in which public are substantially interested. One is a listed company, a company whose shares were listed on the last day of the financial year. Now what happens if at the time of taking loan, it was a listed company, its shares were listed, and on the 31st March, it was not a listed company. Whether when you took the loan, it was a listed company, sir, and on 31st March, it was not a listed company. If you ask me technically, then it is not a company in which public are substantially interested, because when I see the section, it talks about the shares listed on the last day of the financial year, last day of the accounting year. So even when I took the loan, it was not a listed company, and on 31st March it became a listed company. Again, I am taking a loan from a company in which public are substantially interested. So the first clause is a listed company listed on the last day of the accounting year. The second question, which I take the liberty of updating the class, whether subsidiary of a listed company is a company in which public are substantially interested. Can you tell what is your opinion? Subsidiary of a listed company, whether 100% subsidiary of a listed company, whether it is a company in which public are substantially interested?
No.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
No? Why not?
Yes.
Sir, this is very, very valid point, and I would like to clear this controversy. Do you have the act here? No. Now, can you bring the act in income tax? I will go to this point because this is one very serious concern which I am having. Subsidiary of a, because we find in practical field everybody says the subsidiary of a listed company, it is a company in which public are substantially interested. Whether actually it is that. Third is the government company, and fourth is the section 25 company. Now section 25 company is mentioned there, but section 8 company under the Companies Act 13 is not mentioned there. So again that is also a point, because we at the institute level has been giving representation to the finance ministry that suitable amendments should be made in the Income Tax Act to make it compatible with the Companies Act 13. But even now also we find, when we read the Income Tax Act, even now also we find section 25 of Companies Act 1956 word is coming. It is not mentioned in section 8 of the Companies Act 2013. So as of now, only section 25 company is covered. So if you take any loan from a section 8 company as per Companies Act 13, then you are not taking loan from a company in which public are substantially interested. So basically, when you are taking loan or advance from a company in which public are substantially interested, then fair enough. Then you are not covered by deemed dividend. What are the companies which are covered? Closely held public limited company and all private limited companies are hit by section. Company in which public are substantially interested. Sir, with due respect, please don't. Should I discuss this in the class or not? Because you are from the department side. Knowledge sharing, but sir, I think this should be left with the chartered fraternity only. I am discussing this with a clear understanding with you that you are not going to discuss that in your present training institute or anywhere.